Welcome back to 420 Chief. Today's episode is one of the most action packed, unbelievable, yet important conversations I've had on any of my platforms. My guest today is Doc Ray, former, former Army Green Beret, a legacy cannabis cultivator who survived the outlaw years in Humboldt County, ran head to head with federal agents, and is now a college professor teaching cannabis. This is a story that could only exist because of resilience, survival, and a plant that saved a life. Like so many veterans, Doc Ray came home from service carrying invisible wounds. And instead of support, he was labeled, criminalized, pushed underground. What the world called illegal, he knew was medicine. These are the stories that need to be told because we are still losing 22 veterans every single day, and silence is costing lives. Education saves lives. Connection saves lives. And conversations like this remind veterans that healing is possible and that they're not alone. So buckle up. This is a powerful one. With that said, let's welcome Doc Ray. Welcome in, brother. How are you today?
I'm good, Ryan. You caught me in mid exhale. I thought you were going to go about 30 seconds longer there. So
That was perfect then. Got him. That's hilarious as he's partaking. I do want to say, I think you are the first Green Beret I've had on the show. I've had a few brothers from the Army for sure, but I've never had an OG outlaw grower before. We've had my brother Chill Billy, who's my age, grows and gardens for the community, but those in the community, Doc Ray is the man, the myth, and the legend right here. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, what you've been through, what's helped you heal, and what you're doing now. So, Doc, you want to just take us away? Let's talk a little bit about you and your background.
sure, Ryan. First off, it's good to see you again, brother, and sit down and have this conversation. This journey with this plant's been something that I never assumed it would have been. When I was a kid in the 70s and smoking weed with my buddies and behind the barn, was not where it is now at all, and this is I was damaged as a kid, but not nearly as damaged as I was by the time I hit my late 20s, and where I saw just briefly, it's like in California where I saw the community, the veteran community outreach with cannabis therapy about 12 years ago, is when I saw that first happening. And I realized maybe I needed to get off my mountainside in northern Mendocino County. Need to get off my farm and engage a little bit more, And as I took that journey forward, I realized it wasn't just me, that smoked cannabis for my sanity and my mental well-being. I knew it wasn't just me. Over the last decade plus, I've seen that evolving. But before that time, it was just trying to save myself. And I realized over the last 10 years, especially interacting with our community, our military community, our veteran community specifically, that use this plant over opioids and alcohol and all the things that we know, painkillers, all the psychotropics, all the things that we all personally experience ourselves, because I've weaned myself or healed myself or gotten rid of all these pharmaceuticals, except the things that I have to take to keep my old butt alive. Now I don't really take anything other than use ganja, and that's kind of why we're sitting here, So is it unfolded? It's like I didn't really understand it like I see it now. I knew that this plant was really, really special. I just didn't realize how unique it was in so many applications, as we're seeing unfolding, from PTSD treatment to working in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to childhood epilepsy and epilepsy in general, and all these, pain control, cancer, all these things over and over and over. that's the moment we're in, like right now. That's where we're at right now. It's like it's the frontier of it again one more time. So
I think now that it's moved to that, Schedule 1, they can do more of that research, and more of what we already know can be proven, and I think that'll help a little bit as far as the stigmas are concerned, because you're right, they are utilizing they being Big Pharma is already in on CBD for epilepsy and so many other things that there's something to that. Doc, let's back it up. Tell us a little bit about you prior to service. Where are you from? What did you do for fun? Let's get to know you a little bit.
I I'm a single mom. I was born in the '50s, single mom. Growing up in the late '50s and into the '60s. I guess I've been taking care of myself a long time. I've been taking care of myself a long time, and I was about 12. It was before I turned 13. I was with a buddy of mine and his big brother, who was several years older. Had just come back from Vietnam, was smoking weed. My buddy got a joint, stole the joint from him, and that was my first real introduction to cannabis. So, like growing up as a kid, it's like I kind of, lived pretty, not, I wasn't a city boy. I was more like a country boy. I fished and knew how to track and, hunt and all that kind of stuff. Was a kid, I did all those things. So having cannabis around was just part of it in the time period that it was in our country back then. It's way more open. It wasn't like it wasn't not there then too. It was just everybody didn't talk about it like we talk about it now. Everybody's posting it on their social media. Their weed. One of the things that freaked me out. I'm getting off topic here. I'll come back, but it's like when I first came above board as an old outlaw, man, last thing you wanted to be was photographed, and people sure as hell didn't want to be photographed with their pot guy, man. Now everybody wants those photographs. So that portion of it, but back then it was like, I guess, I grew up with an alcoholic father and an abusive alcoholic father, and I really didn't like alcohol. I drank, and I've drank a lot. I drank a lot in my military career. I'm a whiskey drinking, cigar smoking son of a bitch, man. If I choose to be, I choose not to be that anymore. But back in the day, I did do those things with my brothers, and we got into a lot of rowdy situations. And over the years, I picked cannabis over that time, and glad that I did. So, but back then, it was like, I think it was more about I didn't really like the way alcohol was interacting in my childhood as my family at the time, and I didn't like the way it made me feel. So I gravitated towards cannabis, pot, whatever you want to call it. Back then, pot back then is what we called it. But gravitated towards it over all these other things, and that's just part of my journey with it. When I started growing, it sure as hell wasn't what it is now. There weren't any books. There weren't any manuals out. The first manuals were just coming out a year or two after I attempted to grow my first plant in a creek bottom in a broad seed with a buddy of mine. We didn't know what boys and girls were, all these things, man. It was
Right.
real, learning curve real quick. And then the first publications in the mid '70s about Sensimilia, 50 years ago, those very first publications are when we started realizing, males and females and all, and sexing and,
Right.
colored boys and all the shit that we do now. And you can find in a YouTube video and watch for an hour or even less and see a lot of this stuff. We didn't know any of these things. So as it's progressed, now it's like it's just been an evolution with the plant over time. But
Doc, what was going on before what led to you joining the Army and then specifically the Green Berets? Like, what was going on to where you're like, "I'm out of here"?
uh, you know, the, I had a messed up childhood, and again, everybody has problems. I don't say anybody's pain is less is as anybody else's, like that kind of deal. But my my childhood was, my up to 18. I enlisted as soon as I could and to get the fuck out of there. I want to get the fuck out of there, and I tested really well on my scores. The time of the world in the 70s that it was, we had, conflict going on. I was finishing up school, finished up combat engineer school and was going overseas. And when I hit overseas, I just, I was there was, fuck man, there was a couple hundred of us sitting there, and I said for about a month. I said for about a month, Ryan, with twiddling my thumbs after a lot of intense training and didn't really want to sit anymore, and I had still to this day remember, the very sharp looking E7 with a long handlebar mustache, and his hair was a little bit long, smoking a fucking stogie. And, said, you tested really well on your score, son. We can get you out of here like in tomorrow, kind of a deal, or you can sit here and wait to do what it is you are supposed to do as a combat engineer. And I wanted to get the fuck out of there, so I stepped up and got the fuck out of there. And it wasn't much of a thought process as far as the way it is now with my boys. It's like it's a different animal now than what it was then. That was the beginning of it. This is a half a century of refinement going on now, so
Right.
right, that part of it. Okay, I didn't get it at 19. I sure as hell didn't understand it. I didn't know any of the things that I know now. And this, you lived it when you're living in real time, you don't have a clue of what the fuck's going on. It's after the fact, and literally way, way after the fact in my particular case, because of the way we were handled when they let us all go. We were the first ones, and they weren't tracked like my boys do this shit. And they're got all goddamn kinds of shit on them now, tracking them wherever the fuck they move. We're
Yeah.
pre kind of stuff. So there's that big change, and then the alliance of everything 30 years ago, between 94 and 96, when the joint task force thing really grasped hold. That was another major shift in me looking at it from a outsider's perspective and having the knowledge that I have. So those are key differences, and from where was back then to where it is now. And I put it in perspective. I got ETS and discharge, and I got handed like $6,000 in cash and a slap on the back of the head and good luck, man. And nobody, no guidance, no debriefing, no any of that kind of shit. We just put back into society. And as you know, this is far removed from how it's handled now. My own boys tell me, coming back from downrange where they're spend goddamn 3 months debriefing, it was totally missing from my generation to where it is now. So there's that as well. And what you and I were talking about that, you guys, you guys are grown ass men. You've been doing this for a long fucking time. And the things that they didn't do for us, they still don't really do for you. And then the guys that I know that are all in their 30s and 40s and 50s tell me they say that it's even so more compacted on the pressure from all sides, to perform well, that I didn't. I mean, we had it, but it wasn't nearly as the way it is now, in my understanding of it. And I know I got way the fuck off topic.
That's all right, doc. You were talking about, let's talk a little bit about, you went to the Green Berets, you just wanted to get the hell out of that combat engineering school. Didn't really have a chance to think about it because 'cause you're right, in the moment, especially under those high pressure moments like the training programs, something like that says, "I can get you out of this shit now," that's almost a no freaking brainer, and then the sound of it at that age is so badass, you know? it's like, I'm gonna be, I've got a bigger purpose. I can, I've got these skills. They noticed it. Now I'm really gonna use them. And in using that to get the fuck out of here right now, because that's the only way outside of just getting in trouble or hurt.
I
So,
think,
yeah,
partly that, and you're right. Okay, and literally, like what, and I didn't realize this shit until after the fact. It's again, guys your age group that have told me over the last 20 years of shit, right, and brought me back up to speed with what's going on. It's like, but they said the same thing that I said to them. It's like, look, man, signed basically a piece of paper that said they would put me in Leavenworth for capital offense if I opened my mouth. So I shut the fuck up and disappeared off into the trees, and I see, and you said that to me the other day about how many guys we know have gotten out, and what do? They go find a piece of land out by themselves in the middle of nowhere with very few neighbors, and they deal with their mentally and physically and everything that they deal with. I thought that was uniquely me 45 years ago. I thought that was, I'm the only one, right? That kind of a thing. Okay, well, everybody goes through that as well. Of, it's me suffering by myself. No, there's a huge community of brothers and sisters that support each other, especially when it comes to mental health, well-being. For being whole, or as whole, or whatever the fuck that means. Being as whole as you can be, right? So,
right,
see that portion of where I am now with it. It's like what we're doing. Sit here and talk about this from a elder's perspective of I've used this plant for 50 plus years. Not the way I started is not where I am now. The course of my journey for the last 30 plus years has been focusing on cannabis therapeutics for post-traumatic stress relief, and then working in childhood therapeutics in CBGA and CBD in epileptic treatment, right? So all of these things are where I've been focusing on since like the 90s kind of a deal, where I started getting a better grasp of it. And then in the last 20-ish plus years, can't believe it, but like in the early 2000s, dealing with kids with epilepsy, man, with CBD and CBG and CBGA specific genetics. Not hemp, yes, but hemp and cannabis both. Or I don't even really like using the hemp word, but the cannabis plant. There's so much therapeutic value in that range for treating not just them, but what fucks me up. With my being blown up twice and having TBIs. And then knowing that I'm damaged from all the concussions that I've had over the course of my life. As I didn't know then, I do know now. It's part of why I still stick and stutter and repeat myself and loop and all that kind of shit. So there's that part of it as well. Okay, the journey from like 15 to now, with not knowing that it spills over into all these different kinds of head trauma and psychological impact trauma in sports and freaking, with the military community, what we deal with, uh, any kind of head trauma from accidents over and over and over. We're seeing these things come to be the, really what we knew anecdotally, or what they call traditionally, man, traditional medicine. It's like, it's not scientific. There isn't any hard data on it, but we got 10,000 people that swear by it. That's hard to discount. So
it's hard to say that too, because I feel like it's been independently researched. Like, you've helped thousands, if not tens of thousands of veterans, and then there's doctors out there like Dr. Marion McNabb, the president of the Cannabis Center of Excellence, who's done her own independent testing. Dr. Peter Grinspoon, again, another doctor that has done this testing, non-bias, and shown the research. So for me, I feel like it has been Schedule 3 has held it back tremendously. However, we've known this since before it was prohibited back in the '60s. So I would like to talk a little bit more. You said got blown up and you were got out of the army and then you just moved into the mountains. Let's talk about that a little bit. What was going on at that time? What led you to where you went? Let's hear that story because that was pretty phenomenal as well.
Right. All right. It's like, okay, I'm pre-PTSD by a handful of years diagnosis, right? So they didn't call it shell shock, right? It was back when I was in. That's what it was. The terminology was, right? It's like so, and there wasn't an understanding of traumatic brain injuries nearly at all like what there is now.
Right.
That this knowledge is all in the last 15 years of TBIs and explosion concussions because of the Afghan war, right? Okay, you and I both know this, right? These things have been what's happened in the last 20 years, and more specifically the last decade, and even more, in the last 60 months, there's been so many more advances in that field. I didn't know, okay, I had a real short fuse, man. I had a real short fuse as you got into my grill. And even if you didn't really say something wrong to me, I'm a big old boy, man. I'm 6'4". I'm, 220 right now. It's about 250 back then. And, tear, you freaking snap a log in half, man. I isolated myself because I got tired of getting into conflicts. Every time I went into town, I just removed myself from it. That's what's to save my own ass. That's really when you ask like why. That was why I lived on the back of a mountain up in Willits, California, Schaefer Ranch Road. At the back end of the loop, man, for about 17 years, just staying up on the side of the hill by myself because I didn't want to interact. And over the time of cultivating back in that time period, I, found my healing. What you and I were talking about a couple of days ago, the gardening portion of it, the actually touching it, walking through it, feeling it, from taking it from a seed to harvest, all of these things is a real therapeutic value in that by itself, and why I think so many brothers and sisters that cultivate for their own well-being like to cultivate like I do and like you do. I love to grow my plants, so there was that value. And then um, I guess for lack of a better word, man, growing Outlaw back in the day, man, there's a certain adrenaline rush that goes with that's very similar in being in harm's way. It's like being flown every day. Not that I wanted it to happen, but it was definitely one of those things that I didn't mind happening when it did. It was just kind of a course of action of the day when the helicopters, or even before the copters, when the fixed wings were flying the valleys, looking and spotting for cannabis patches. That time period was from going to this, we're talking 30 years ago, the mid 90s to where it switched over to medical and we started growing out in full sun. That was coming up on about 30 years. But before that time, it was pretty, it was stealth. We wore camouflage. We hung out by ourselves. The community was pretty small, very tight knit group of people. You didn't really get outside of the handful of people that you worked with. My big brothers were all vets as well on the mountain where I was at. We're all ex-military in one branch or another, but
Was
the
it
same.
one of your military brothers that got you to go out there? Is that what got you to move out there?
Uh, a little bit, to get into the game, come get back into the game. Yeah, a little bit was it was yeah, I mean, an influence, and also and also a comfortable familiarity of not really, civilian world, man, doesn't really suit me very well. I don't really like listening to other people that know what the fuck they're talking about, and all these other things. It's like, and okay, that's inherently across our community as a whole. everybody hates that shit, right? Okay, so there was that, and then being around other brothers in arms that were had been there and done that, gave me a sense of comfort and community that I was sorely missing, being on my own after I got out, and you ask about the concussion damage. Yeah, it's like I got blowed up at my first concussion was at about 21 when we were breaching a doorway and a door was wired and exploded and wrapped the door around me, and my imprint and and only because it was steel, I believe, is the only reason I'm here. But back then, my teammates, I still pretty vividly, one on one side, one on the other, get up, you big son of a bitch, let's go, kind of a moment, and get up and go. And it's still to this day something that I deal with day in and day out, and it's like I see glimpses of those moments, not as bad as it was when I was younger. It doesn't go away. It gets less frequent. I think maybe it's the best way to put it. It doesn't go away; it just becomes less frequent. And then,
I wanna
you
say,
know,
doc, I'm proud of you for talking about it, when you get to the level that you're at, and the work that you've done to get to the point to sit here with me today and talk through that is such an inspiration for so many others who did just brush it off and come on, and you said it. Get up, you big son of a bitch, and it's like, that's what we're expected to do, you know? And you here you are today, you know?
I do, Ryan. I did. Okay, here's the reality, man. 90 days in the psych ward and tethered to a freaking table, and dealing with that bullshit. And then 6 years of sitting in therapy, man, at the vet center. That's the only reason why I'm sitting here. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't. Okay, and I was forced to. I was forced to use the tools after my Harley wreck in '09. Man, I didn't have insurance, and the only one in my ex, you just told her to go to the safe and get my fucking card out of the safe that I didn't even carry. She didn't even really know. I said, if you hand them this card and wheel me in the door, they have to take me and take care of me. And that time period before that time was almost 20 years for it since I've been in a VA before my wreck in '09, and at that moment, brief moment in time is why I'm sitting here with you, or why I even came back. I was pretty much done after '03. It's like I watched the community get, in '96, those of us that were in it we were slowly coming above board in '96, '97, '98, coming slowly get going and getting recommendations so you could cultivate behind screen and all this stuff. And in Mendocino, where I was at the time, it was like the rules changed all the fucking time. It was like from how many plants to square footage to, too many plants to not enough plants. And then you can stack recommendations and get your caregiver status and all this kind of stuff. So, we were learning to navigate the laws, the California laws for medical cannabis for Mendocino County back at that time period, was learning those little ins and outs of it. So we were always adjusting, but as we got more of growing in the shadows, shade growing before that time period, which is what everybody did. You had your plants hidden, they were spread out over hundreds of acres, and it took forever to harvest 15 plants, and from that moment was us like in stepping forward in '96 and forward, the first group of guys, and at least in Mendo, there was only a handful of us that went and got recommendations that first year, and a few more the next year and a few more the next year after that. But then it was right after 9/11, man. It was like '01 happened. That was a major shift in cannabis because people that were buying cannabis regularly stopped, that or not didn't stop. It went way, way down real quick in '01. And then more and more people were getting into it and they didn't really understand it. They were coming up what we've seen now, coming in growing for greed over growing for the plant, right? So, and it's not that we didn't make money at it before, we did, but there was and you just go to the Triangle, and go to Northern California, and you'll see it at these farms that are still there. They're not the weakest ones in the game, man. 99.878% of them are gone. Almost every one of them is gone. These are the baddest boys and girls in the world when it comes to growing quality full sun flower. And you simply really, if you aren't told that it's a difference, you can't tell the difference. And I'm on the East Coast teaching where I am right now, and I'm teaching smart farmers that have been farming their whole lives how to grow cannabis, and have dialed them into growing the Humboldt way or the Triangle way, the Emerald Triangle way or my way of the Emerald Triangle, and I'm looking at it before we got on here, and if I didn't tell you this wasn't outdoor flower, full term flower, the 99.9% of the consumers can't tell the difference. It's only because we say something. And a lot of people that see flower in some of these new emerging markets where they're getting like, you know, and again, it's a learning. You have to have time at this. How long you've been growing up. It's got in 18. You're just now learning it. You're just now starting to figure out you're not a master at this craft. Well, I've been doing it half a century, and I don't call myself a master at this. Mother God teaches me every day, man. When I work with her, and go say, I'm a master grower at 12 years or a decade or even 15 or so years. That's just so, those of us that do this, we just see that on a card nowadays and we kind of chuckle to ourselves. It's like, I know, and why I'm saying that is I have friends that are small scale home cultivators that grow their whatever 4 or 6 plants at home, whatever their state laws are, and they're good, man. They're better than 99% of the rec market, or the regulated market. They're good growers, man. They understand it. They know how to get the flower correct to the end, and then more importantly, what to do once they cut it down. So, and that's like been completely. And I got off topic. I know we're going this way, but it got completely ripped out of the market over the last 5 years. Is the difference between how to grow really quality flower and also post production, get it to get it into the jar where it's flavorful and dried correctly and doesn't have any funkiness to it, or all the things that we're encountering now, and what consumers have told me for 10 years too. That kind of stuff is mind boggling to me. So this community, grow your own, man. Grow your own medicine. If you're able to, grow your own medicine. And if you're not able to, then support a small operator who does do it honorably and ethically and holistically. I even will go beyond. I don't really even like the organic word anymore because everybody's overplayed it so much. And then you read some of the guidelines of what they allow in organic application. I don't really even like that. So me personally, I picked the word holistic over the last decade as my choice of, if you grow your flower holistically, because there are many ways around the ball to grow quality flower. It's, do you do it honorably to the plant and also the end consumer, which is where, in my opinion, Recweed completely misses it, because they're not about the end consumer. They're about profit share value and shareholders, and getting it quicker and cleaner and cheaper. And and okay, here's a big flaw on that: it's not cleaner. We see this over and over. And whoever's listening to this, I challenge you. If you don't believe me, go pick out of your state. Go pick after state seals and testing. Go pick 10 samples from 10 random locations and send them in and have them tested. And I assure you that the majority of them will fail. That's the reality of it, and I hate to be that way, but it's kind of what you and I were talking about, Ryan. It's kind of where I am right now with it, brother. It's like, I'm too old for it anymore, man. They don't really want me to cultivate. All I'm here is really to try and help to tell people to, grow your own and what to be aware of if you can't grow your own, and what to go look for when you are in here, there. And I hate to say it, man, until cannabis figures it out, that supporting a traditional mom and pop is probably still the smartest thing in the country right now.
I
That's
agree, and it's more easily accessible than the dispensaries because a lot of our veterans, especially those that are out in the middle of nowhere, they're nowhere near a dispensary, you know? So, you touched on quite a bit there, and I'm gonna agree with you. The growing of the plant itself is so therapeutic, and you know what's in it, you know where it comes from, and you learn to communicate with the plant. The plant needs something, it'll tell you what it needs with the colors, it tells you, and you just pay attention, and when you're out there doing that every day, giving it that undivided attention, that is so very therapeutic, so thank you for that solid piece of advice for any of our veterans out there if you can legally. I know a guy that's got some amazing genetics. But Doc, I wanna take us back even further because you have such an amazing story, Army Green Beret, blown up 2 times, moved out to the mountainside, we're growing in the shadows. You left one war zone to some kind of find another. You wanna talk us through some of those experiences?
you know, it- uh, this is a real interesting time in our country. It's like the late 80s into the early 90s, right? Or from the mid 80s to the mid 90s, even that decade was California was the only place that was really uh, growing cannabis and any kind of in your face at all during that time period was the West Coast, and more specifically, not even California, Northern California and the Emerald Triangle, man. And that was in our community and our culture, it's a lot of people consider it the Mecca and the Holy Grail when it comes to cannabis, right? So in that time period, man, I mean, it was a real good versus evil, and I'm considered the community to be the green community to be the good versus evil, and there was a time period in the 80s when the DA in Mendocino County, who's now gone, Norm Vroman, when Norm was DA, that he finally put his foot down and said, we're not going to prosecute mom and pop farms anymore. That was a major, major shift in how we were dealt with within when it came to law enforcement in the triangle, and then in Humboldt, completely different rules up there. It's like there was even a more of a war zone. It's like where they were handcuffing people and pepper spraying them and kicking in doors and all that kind of shit and raiding people's homes and farms and so the rules, like I said earlier, the rules were really, really, um, and they still are. They're still real convoluted now. From region to region, state to state, county to county, neighborhood to neighborhood, it changes. So there was that even more, and then the illegality and the money that law enforcement was getting from the government played huge into what was known as the Comet and Camp programs, which was the campaign for eradication of marijuana. There was two of those two entities that were the ones that flew everything and then sent in the guys with the Dodge trucks pulling uh, four wheelers on the back of them with racks and loppers and shit and going and knock farms down and cut down patches and stuff. It's like there's a and it's still to this day, it's like there's this what I said to that adrenaline rush earlier, it's like okay, with me and my journey, when my mentor that was like kind of where I am now, old gray haired guy, big gray beard, and he would sit and he got me to slow down and not try to fight everybody. I wanted to engage everybody. It's like, fuck it, let's fight them. Let's fight them. And he got me to let's sit down and smoke one and talk about it. And me, I'm going to go do this. Now I'll meet you up at the top. If they cut the gates and are coming in, I'll meet you at the top by the water tanks. And we had a stash box up there. We'll sit down and roll one. And we'll just wait for them to get there. That didn't happen. Like from that's going to be 97 to 03 or 4. Like that time period when of growing excuse me, growing out in the sun in the medical thing in Mendocino. That was what we were doing. It was me shifting for the real shift of relaxing a little bit. And, his foster, taught me, let's sit down and smoke. And why I do that now with young brothers and sisters, they're wound up. Let's sit down, let me roll one. We'll talk about it for a while and, go from there. So that's part of my shifting to where I am now, but I think you asked me about going into the hills. That was me trying to be in the system up until September of '01. Man, I tried to hold a job and tried to be part of it. But when 9/11 happened, within about maybe a year, I completely unplugged and said, fuck this shit. I'm not going to be part of it anymore, and I wasn't really part of, okay, by that, I mean, we all, and you still do it to this day, you're um, carpenter, builder, landscape guy, tree trimming guys, all of these jobs that have fingers in cannabis, those were the different kind of jobs that we did when we were, growing illegally and being, trying to be whatever that quasi legal thing was, and I laughed because, what did you do? I mean, I lived in a 5-inch by 7-inch mailbox for 21 years in Willits, California, man, right? It's like, that's what we did, so when I see what you told me, your buddies that live like, man, I have them now that, they're close, they're my age and, my generation of old vets, man, where they still live out in the middle of nowhere, and they,
Doc,
right?
the ones that don't have the land, they want it, but there's the guys that don't have the land, they want it, they're hitting I go camping, I'll go meet some of my brothers that don't have the land at a campsite, but that's what that's what the veterans that I've known and that have these similar stories, and I travel across the nation, and I do this, with other veterans and meet up with them, and I smoke with them, and we take just a mindful moment together, and it's kinda like you said, it's just slow down a little bit, and there's that camaraderie, that shared sense of something that we have together. Like you mentioned, getting out and working with veterans, you felt a bit like an outlaw. And I'll tell you, I go to Sunny Side of Freedom, who's in here, does veteran meetups. And I remember the third meetup I went to in Mississippi. I sat there, and I was actually one of my brothers I'd served with in Kuwait was there at this one. Anyways, it felt like if anything happened, we knew exactly what to do without even saying a word. Like, if for whatever reason shit went sideways or didn't go as planned, no need to even talk. I felt comfortable knowing I'm with a good group of folks that are gonna keep me safe and have my back, and for whatever reason, it's like having my service dog, that just made me able to relax even more and take it in and slow down and enjoy it without running through a million scenarios at once. But Doc, I wanna even take it to, some of the experiences that you had. I know you had mentioned you'd been raided. How many times have you had you been raided, and you wanna
Oh,
talk about any of those stories?
I mean, there's evaded a couple of them if they were coming in the front door, they're coming in the front gate. We were going over the back fence and getting the fuck out of there, and they come back to the aftermath of all the, the water lines being cut and your plants are all gone or knocked down, and
It's so
here's back that
discouraging.
time period, they go fly you, they go fly with the fixed wings in the valley and pinpoint it, and they didn't come and get them. Then they waited, and they waited for it to get to the fall when the plant actually had some value because it had flower weight on it. That's when everybody was holding their breath back. Back in the day was August, September, and even maybe into the first October when they were coming back and coming in and knocking patches down and raiding patches and cutting it all down. Okay. Now, as it evolved, with and there's a few of them. There's a few different ones of being, okay. I didn't really talk about this one very much. It's like coming in and leaving and coming back after the fact, and where they'd gone through and just destroyed everything in the house. The gun safe was unlocked, and instead of just opening the door, they took a blowtorch and cut a hole through the top of it to fuck it up, and going through every drawer in your house, and the old lady's stuff's thrown all over the place. Were you coming in to just create mental anguish and, try and break us down mentally, or was there any real purpose to this? And we used to have a saying within our community, and it kind of holds true now today with what we're seeing. A lot of times they were just thugs with guns and badges, and and I try not to feel that way because I have family that's LE, and I've got former LE that's in my community now that have repented for their evil ways if they ever busted people with cannabis, because they come to me for advice and to help them with their mental well-being. And my recommendation is to smoke weed, man, and let me help you find the right plant for you. And before the school thing and all that, that was always my approach with people back in the day. If okay, you were coming in and you couldn't sleep versus I need to work and my back's hurting, what I would recommend to you were two totally different plants, right? So there's this evolution of what was kept our hands tied, kept us away. It was like I said, nobody wanted a fucking photograph of me with their ass in 2000 and 1990 and 80 and into the 70s. They sure as hell didn't want to be seen with the guy they were getting their pot from. And now everybody wants that. And those ones of us that are old school, we're still traumatized by that shit. We're the ones that stayed and tried to make the transition over the last decade to decade and a half of recreational cannabis. And I'm going to go with what I know. There was only a couple of states that had rec laws in place until California stepped in 15 and 16. And that last decade, all these other states that are in it now have dogpiled in, and most of them have never cultivated the plant before either. And I've met a lot of really good farmers, but they haven't ever grown hemp before or cannabis before. And she's a fickle plant. You don't have to be a genius, but you've got to know the basics and understand how to do one right. And you don't know how to do one right and think you can grow 50,000 of them. This has been a major learning curve for the last decade for a lot of the players that are in it now. So before that time period, we really stayed to ourselves. Okay, if it was me and you, brother, we didn't talk to anybody. We had
Yeah.
a guy between us or a girl that was between us that allowed people to have access. There were a lot of levels of separation that don't exist anymore. And so from that back in that time period, it was just a different animal from being raided, being being raided and slip tied and pushed over, push us over face over into the dirt and laugh as they're going through your shit. It's, I mean, for me, it was more pissed me off more than anything, infuriated me. I had, Eddie Lepp was a mentor and like a older brother to me, and I was one of Eddie's guys at the front gate, back in the day, back in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was like, with Eddie going, to not teaching me to just relax, and not to fight and engage was a major one, but also very humbling and humiliating to be, laughed at and hands tied behind your back, cuffed with your hands and pushed over in the dirt. It's one of those things that you never quite get over. You don't think about it all the fucking time like you did. Okay, the remarkable moments of those moments in time is like watching that incident in '92 happen that I'm talking about. It's like the community rallying around there and going from uh, excuse me, being in trouble, not having enough, almost 30,000 plants, not having enough pieces of paper, prescription or recommendations to warrant the plant count, and the community rallying around the area there and getting enough recommendations to make this thing where it was actually defendable, and it being recognized as a church like the farm was back then was also another component to this that was going on during the late 80s and early 90s. It was like those moments, like it's okay, bro. So Eddie's gone now, and I just saw Ed here a year ago or so, I guess. Rosenthal was down at Oakland literally at the same time, was fighting with the feds down in Oakland for being the grower for the city of Oakland, back then too. These real pivotal moments in cannabis, and more specifically up in the triangle, 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours north of that area on the bay where the farm was in Lake County. It was like was a whole nother animal all in itself, and then, like I said, and then seeing how the politics changed 30 plus years ago within law enforcement was really why the triangle stayed, in my experience, like the mecca that it is. And like even like today, you go to Mendocino, and the sheriff's there, pro mom and pop and pro small scale, and the same thing in Humboldt County, and the same thing in Trinity County, Lake County. This little area where cannabis has just been there forever, and you go back 25 years ago, man, and it wasn't that way in a lot of those places. And even 20 years ago, it's been that way for a while in the Triangle, and Mendocino specifically, where I was at the bulk of my time. I retired up in Humboldt after my Harley wreck. That's when I moved up to Humboldt to relax and try and get away from it. And moved pretty far north and didn't get the fuck away from it. Moved right into the heart of it, and it's like the last decade and a half has been what you guys see now, the DRG brands and my Veterans Choice cannabis line, the Terps by Doc and Bentley from 4 or 5 years ago, it's all these moments in my journey over the last decade to a decade and a half with it. It was not at all where it started, Ryan. It wasn't anywhere at all. My old partner, the big brother's about 10 years older than me. All we ever wanted to do was just do it legally and pay taxes on it and do it as a real business. And it was interesting the first couple of years because there was a no competition. You know, they had all the retail space, or not all, but they controlled the retail space, and they didn't have flower. And this is holds true with all of my friends that are up there that were in it back then, or maybe a few of them even still in it. But you know, we didn't have any competition. There was always a avenue to put your product onto the shelf, and then that was the first 3 or 4 years, and it's like then from the pandemic to now, you know, the last 5.5, whatever the hell is going on, 6 years, you know, that time period is like that's been the part that's been the compression of craft flower, in my opinion, the crushing of the craft flower industry. You know, it's like really just decimated that community. And so, like I said, if you ever go up to the Triangle and go do the the Canna Trail, you know, do the Canna Tourism Trail, and the farms that are still in it, man, they're amazing farms with amazing flower, and all have great stories, and you know, care about the product that they're producing, and that's like sorely missing from the recreational market, and 90 to 99% of the market I've seen. And I've seen a lot of it. I've been to a lot of the states over the last 6, 7 years. I know I've probably got a couple people laughing or listening to this thing, shaking their head, going, "Yeah, yeah," because been to a lot of market around the world, and in the United States, looking at different emerging markets and seeing the little steps that are what you and I were talking about the other day. You know, the little steps that are missed along the way to get to the flower that's the end in the jar that they want to smoke. That's what I do, or you know, what my team does for us in our little small scale thing that we do now. And we're not even a production farm, man. We're a research farm. You know, it's like where we what I what you said about the Schedule 3. I don't want it. I think descheduling is the answer, but I'm a pragmatic realist son of a bitch, man. The writing on the wall is they're going to pass it to Schedule 3. Now, it may eventually get descheduled down the road, but right now they're going to let big pharma, unfortunately, get their hands on it and get a grasp of it before they open it up at all. And that's happening in real time right now. So, for the last 3+ years, I've been focusing on education and data collection and R&A and R&D on various plants and products, and working with licensed farms and things like that. And I believe that's where the real value is for the veteran community. You know, is if we can continue to advance what we've been doing for decades and years and years and years and decades now with cannabis therapeutics for our well-being. That's a major one. And okay, what you and I both know, we got tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of veterans around the world that are pro cannabis. They believe in it. They may not smoke it like I do in a joint, but they're dabbing it or putting it on their tongue in a tincture or rubbing it on somewhere over and over and over and over and over again now. And this has been going on for a long time, close to 40 years. And my, you know, wide angle view of looking at all since from me to where it is now, you know, 40, 50 years of cannabis as a choice, a medicine of choice over synthetics and psychotropics and alcohol, or you know, a 45 or a prison cell, man. You know, so all of those things too. In my
I'm
hobby, in my rambling.
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think a lot of people realize that 68% of all veterans who go to the VA are prescribed SSRIs or opioids that actually increase the mortality rate. And we currently have a veteran suicide crisis, not just in America, but overseas as well. I know it's true in Canada, it's true in Australia. But other countries have admitted this, that, yes, we know that this medicine increases the mortality rate. Yes, we know that this medication causes cancer. Yet, we don't make a change. and we run propaganda campaigns against the medicine that you and myself and so many thousands and tens of thousands and millions of other veterans have found that is a much safer alternative with way safer side effects. And that's something that I wanna segue into is, for those that don't know, DRG, Doc Ray Genetics, Doc has his own patented strains. I think you have 5 patented strains, Doc?
I've got yes, yes. I mean, technically, yes. I've got 4 that I've been working on, like, seriously, and 2 that are pretty well known. My blue skunk genetic line is the one that I've worked on for my own well-being for 20 years now, coming up on 20 years, like, right now. And it's like, uh, is a therapeutic, specifically geared towards, post-traumatic stress relief, man, for my own damage. And it's like, I've worked on that plant since started in it in spring of '06. So I'm coming up on my 20th year of working on it. Now it's far advanced from where I was originally with my first crossing of it, but it's a stabilized and IBL, inbred line, genetic line that I've got pretty much to where I want it from and ready for it to go into scale production. We're in that phase of it right now.
Now, Doc, was that the cannabis you were growing on the mountainside sending out to your brothers to get help? Is that the strain that got you off the mountain? Can you tell that story? Because that just touched my heart when you told me about this.
Yeah, okay. This is 10-ish plus years ago. I was we were coming above board. We were becoming a cannabis brand, a cannabis company. This is the beginning of it. We didn't really know what we're doing, but my old team, they always knew. My fourth first was make my own medicine and then help my brothers and sisters. So about 10 or so years ago, I was sending flour. This is all in California. I'm staying within my own state. It's like, we didn't venture out of our safe haven because we knew what we were fairly protected in our state back then. But I was sending this, what I'm smoking right now keeps me calm and grounded, and helps, and like 20, like my standard spill on it, it helps get the demons out of my head. And about 20 minutes later, I go, fuck, my back doesn't hurt anymore. That's this plant,
The
so
entourage effect.
right. So most people really, okay, now over the years, I've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of vets that have consumed it. They're tried and true fans on the thing. It got a lot of data on it now. It's pretty easy to find online in a few sources, reputable sources. But long story short, yeah, that's my baby. One of my plants that I've been working on for a long, 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 long time. And pre that time period, I didn't know any fucking people, man. It was my sanity. It's what kept me alive. It's what kept me grounded in my well being. So back then, it isn't where it is now. But the plant that we have now, the DRG, the patented blue skunk, is that genetics specifically is a Santa Cruz Blue Dream with a Humboldt County skunk number 1 that's been refined over the years to what it is now, and it's a stabilized genetic line that most cultivators, especially mom and pops, like it. I've had a lot of people grow it in a variety of states and a variety of countries over the last decade, and uh, like I said, it's in a few places and a few markets in the country. I don't know about globally, but in the country, it's in a few markets and in a few places you can probably find it. And if you're on the West Coast, I know you can find my blue skunk in a handful of locations in California and up and down the West Coast. So, yeah, that's my girl, and then another one that's real popular is my Black Apple Kush, which is another one. I've worked on it for about about 12 or 13 years now. That's my post Harley wreck comeback plant. And it got a gold medal in 23 in the California State Fair. I didn't grow the plant. That was my genetics that they grew and submitted. But yeah, it's another one of my girls that I'm real proud of. She's a very full gas and fruit. Yeah, getting away from the candy thing, trying to break away from that, but big chunky buds, real dense and heavy, especially if you're working with light manipulation at all. She's times real quick, under 60 days, mid 50 days, 54 to 56 on a timed lighting, and still finishes pretty quick before October. And most of the globe finishes before October 1. So farms here where we're doing our R&D this year in Virginia, we were all out of the field by, I think, the end of September with it. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, another good for, even if you get it started correctly and you don't have any hiccups and lags, she turns and burns pretty quick. There's actually a pheno that's still in that we're trying to isolate right now that's even quicker by about 14 to 20 days faster in the field, and it's weeks quicker in controlled lights environments. So, but that's another one that I've been working on for a long time. And then I get my reintroduction of the original Raspberry Kush from Northern California, from Burnt Ranch. That's one that I've worked on for decades, and then was stewarded the seeds here. I was 11 or somewhere, yeah, 11 or 12, somewhere that way, from the creator's wife, who he had passed, to bring it back. And I was working with some smart young people down in Southern California that are like plant geek cannabis kids that had went to college for this shit, and real smart men and women. But doing a restoration project on it too, which is really cool. It's a first true double purple, double indica in the world, and a serious old school pain reliever I used for cancer and AIDS, both within those communities, for pain control. And it's real CBN rich. It's wouldn't be okay here. It wouldn't be on the market, and isn't on the market within the rare exceptions, because it only yields at about 15 to 17% THC, which won't get it on the recreational shelf hardly anywhere at all, unless they're
Right.
therapeutics. They won't even buy it. But it's also about 15 to 17% CBN. And anybody knows what that is. That's a shit that puts your butt to sleep. You taking a nap, big boy, and that's the reality of that plant. And I've seen it for decades and decades in a variety of medical applications give tremendous relief to people with pain control and also needing to take a nap, so for sleep aid as well. But been working on that one, and then my girl that everybody really loves, another one everybody loves, my orange cream frost, which is one that got me in trouble in 19, got me in trouble, and took it over to Nevada, and went to a desert show and took my big full fat ass full sun regenerative buds, and got best in show with it, and got in trouble on social media. Didn't really know what the fuck was going on, man. Got hashtags banned, lost the whole fucking thing. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. And I did break the rules, man. I was out of my state, and I did take best in show with that plant. But yeah, that's a real special orange genetic line that's super flavorful and really cool therapeutic value as well, as far as uh, pain control and taking the edge off in your head. And it's a orange cream cross with raspberry kush of a royal male that I picked. Was just purple stalks, purple leaves, purple hair, just stinky, I'll get out boy that I crossed with. And then I've been working on it for about 5 or 6 years. advanced it over the last 2 years, and then this last year redid it to bring it around with what I'm calling apples and oranges. And it's I think I feel very confident in my team that they got the correct boys and girls bred again. The flower smells like an orange, an orange Julius is how I have described it to people, like an orange Julius smells, smoking an orange Julius.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
So not to get too much into it, there's a bunch of them going on. I've been working on some one-to-one stuff for a long time as well, Ryan. It's like medical stuff, like with Susie Q and with Trident and Harlequin and a couple of others, and we're moving with those projects forward too to get them hopefully in the space. My Susie Q AMC Afghani Colombian Mexican cross the 74 hippie trail with the Suzy Q's, like an F4, I believe, F4, F5 right now, and just sent the flower off from the R&D farm to go have it tested to get the numbers back on it. We're in real time, like 48 hours ago. So we're, working the process in the medical end of it to try and find high value therapeutic cannabis genetics for a variety of ailments, but to also, sorry about that, a variety of ailments, but to, did it again, trying to reach around here, but a variety of ailments, but to also to be get seeds into our brothers and sisters' hands so they can grow it themselves too, which I think is a huge component that's missing in a lot of the markets. Is they get something, they smoke it, it works for them. How do I get this to grow it again? That's seems to be a repetitive issue that I see over and over and over. And it's like connecting some dots with people that I know in my community, with other veteran centers of influence within their communities where we can get this gear economically to free into their hands. A lot of these people, like I am, this is how we make our living. To do it for free is hard to do, but we can definitely do it very economically for
Could could you
others.
imagine? Could you imagine, Doc, if we just started in the VA alone, and rather than, prescribing something, they gave people an allowance, a yearly allowance to grow for their seeds, their maintenance, and I think they would find that they not only provided, medicine, but they provided therapy as well. And I wanna work backwards a little bit because when we talked on the phone the other day, you told me you yourself had isolated up on that mountain, and I want our listeners to know what it actually took for you to come down from that to get to where you are now.
Oh my God. Fuck, Ryan. I mean, okay, my want to, okay, I'm a stubborn old man. That's why I'm still in the game. I'm an ex-GB man. They call me an old snake eater, man. I'm in this motherfucker. Okay, me, when you pry it out of my cold dead hands. And then when I started stepping, I wasn't coming down to Southern California because it's like 700 plus miles from where I was at to get down there, but I was shipping flour to veteran outreach organizations in the greater LA and Santa Barbara, Ventura, SoCal, man. I was sending flour to different groups of, Weed for Warriors, Walk and Talk. They all have programs to get flour into the community's hands. Some of these founders are, they're like friends, man. It's been a long time. They started reaching out about, it wasn't long, man, within the year of it, of kind of come out and be a part of it. Oh, fuck, I don't want to do that. It's too far down there, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fast forward about 3 years. It was one of the guys' birthdays. I had fresh flour in. I wasn't doing anything. And I'd been talking. I got in my truck and drove down, and okay, for me, that was a pivotal moment in me coming off my mountain, man. It's like, and that was probably like in 17, 17 or 18, in that range. I made the trek down to Los Angeles for the first time to see what was going on a little bit, and being in these guys are still, they're still brothers to this day with me. It's like, and they're all like, the age of my boys and girls. My kids are all in their 40s, and my youngest son's 26, for crying out loud. But my oldest son's 46, so there's a, I got kids spread out over long. But what I said to you, man, you guys are grown ass men and women. You've been there, done that. Got exes and outlaws, in-laws. Freaking payments, all kinds of shit, man. This is real, man. Right? I'm at one of these events, sitting around with a bunch of guys that I like, and we're smoking and talking and just kind of being. And I realized it was helping them like it helped me. And we're getting out, and this is a kind of a cool, it's just veterans, just a veteran meetup, out in the middle of a national park and smoking weed, got a fire going and some cover to sit. Right. I mean, it was one of those kind of deals where I kind of went, wow, man, okay, now what I said earlier, I just thought it was me. That was me going, wow, man, there's a lot of us. Okay. There's a lot of us, right? There's, veteran groups, VFWs, American Legion, all these different little things all around the country. Every little town's got a VFW or American Legion hall, or maybe both, in every little town around the country. Well, there's pockets of vets everywhere around this country. That's what I saw in my exploring down in Southern California. Well, it wasn't too shortly after that, within a year or two, I kind of got thrust into the spotlight with the Terps by Doc and Bentley pre-roll, or excuse me, brand launch. It's like when Bentley DeVillen and I did that project, and 5 years ago, that was Bentley. It was me and him, but it was Bentley's idea, and it's like literally was a slapping the industry in the face. It's not THC, it's terpenes. That's where the value is. And we're the guys that did that. It was me and B, man. And it's like, and I see that little, okay, what happened, dude, man? I'm speaking in Las Vegas, I'm speaking in LA, I'm traveling all over the freaking place on the western coast. I'm cameras in my face. I was way different than I've gotten, not used to it, but comfortable with it enough to be able to do it. And then, like, these things, I could sit here and smoke a joint in my living room and talk to you for an hour or so and say motherfucker, and nobody bleeps it. I'm all right with that, and that's kind of like the interviews. What you'll see, they all know it. My brand manager, her joke, it's like he smokes weed when he's being interviewed and he says fuck, and
My kind of people.
right, so it's like that's this whole moving to where, what we're sitting here doing now, man. It's like, it wasn't okay. What I told you when I went up, dude, I didn't like people, man. And even my friends, that you don't come over unannounced. If I run into you in town and you make plans with me, this is pre-cell phones. One, no, this is dial up on AOL, man. I'm on the side of the mountain. I ain't got dial up in AOL, motherfucker. I don't do this shit. That's the way I used to be. I've come away from that over the years. The Harley wreck in '09, that was a pivotal moment of me switching. It forced me back into society. It forced me to come back, and I got help from the VA, them, telling me all the shit I didn't want to say. They said, well, we own your ass now. All these things have happened in the last 15, 16-ish years in my journey with it. The wreck was a major shift for me, Ryan. I would not be sitting here. I wouldn't be in this at all. Probably still growing weed somewhere, in illegally underground, but or maybe working for somebody, but I don't think I would ever be what we're sitting here doing right now if it hadn't have been for that one brief second in time that changed my life. Broke my left jaw, brothers and sisters, knocked my left eye out of my head, crushed the right side of my body. Again, I'm about 6'4" plus, and was a 265 back then, man. I was thick, and he's like the doctor that's a buddy now that put my eye back in my head and wired my jaw and shit. Laughing, like, man, it'd have killed a smaller man.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, I've heard that shit before. It's like, that's part of me coming forward now, and I only have a handful of people that even freaking really even know me pre-wreck. A couple of buddies that know me before my Harley wreck, but for the most part, it's what I said to you the other day when we were talking. I don't know, man. I was pissed when I woke up on the table, man. I'm blind in my left eye, my jaw's broke, my body's crushed, and I'm still fucking here. I just want to get off this fucking rock so bad I couldn't hardly stand it back then. Now it's become more of a journey and of trying to figure out why as I've moved forward over the last 15 years. And I tell people this now. I don't know why Mother Ganja kept me here, but she kept me here for a reason. And then I've been identified as a defender of Mother Ganja and a defender of the tribe, and I take that role real seriously as a grandfather now. I've seen what they've done to my community of men and women, that our towns and our little communities have been destroyed by this recreational weed. Thriving communities in Northern California are now ghost towns, and 99% of them are gone. And like I said, you see a farm that's still in cannabis in Northern California, it's a mom and pop. They're not the weakest motherfuckers in the room. They're the baddest boys and girls in the game, and they're really good at what they do. And that's part of what I see where I am now, is to shine light on that community and try and protect it as best as I'm able to get the information out. That's what I'm doing now with you and other people. And then what, okay, this community, man, this is a veteran centric platform specifically to shine light on what we in our community are. And then your focus on whole plant medicine, like what we were talking about, not just cannabis therapeutics, but whole plant wellness therapeutics. This is the future, the cutting edge of the front of it right now, and like my lawyers, you're at the tip of the spear. Fuck, I've been at the tip of the spear since I was 19 years old, man. And it's like I just don't look at it any other way, honestly, brother. I just kind of don't, I don't know. I don't get it. I do know one thing: if it ain't your time to go, it can't kill me. My grown ass boys, man, a bolt of lightning and a train at the same time to kill me. I mean, maybe that's the oldest one, man. Maybe that's kind of where it is right now. I'm here to talk to the community and help my brothers and sisters in arms first and foremost with how to grow it for themselves, how to find a cultivator. If you need a specific genetic combination, that's a real easy reach out to go, hey, I'm looking for something to help me with this and this, or this specifically. And we've got a pretty extensive Rolodex now of genetics for a variety of applications already at our fingertips. And we've got a lot of really smart operators that are always willing to help this community out. It's like think like you and I talked about this, that deal with MJ BizCon, that train wreck, and it's like they don't really support, they don't put any light on this community. There isn't anything to support veterans, and veterans like my big brothers and one sister were all old nom vets that grew the plant, and they were growing it like I was before any of this legal shit ever happened. And every community that I've traveled around this country and a lot of around the world now, it's like, but in this country, I've seen it in every community that I go to where I speak at these small little gatherings now. There's always a handful of old farts in the back that look like me, and gals with long, straight gray hair, and they're nodding. And those are the elders in the community, and they've just been in the shadows and silent because of the trauma that they endured because it was illegal for so long. So they don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. And I'm trying to get them to step more into the light everywhere I go now when I talk to communities of, look, this are the elders here. You know, I'm not staying here, but these are the elders here in your community. They have the knowledge. They're willing to share it if you ask them. You just got to be come to them on their terms. Why? They've endured a lot. And if you've been in cannabis in the last 10 years, you haven't endured anything that they have endured when it comes to being traumatized by it. And I ask that younger community to have a little grace when you sit down with them and understand they might be a little apprehensive to say things, but I did it with that room of people I didn't know, brother. I gave them my Bud Swell formula right out of my head that I would have shared with you 10 years ago more than a man in the moon. Okay. And that's where we are right now. I want you to grow good flower. I want you to have a successful harvest. You know, my team in Virginia having problems with everything. We got them all in the barn this year. The operations guy, literally, what he said to me, man, on a positive note, we got them all in. That's a major win, man. From losing some from one form of fashion to the other before you get them into the barn, working them all year and then lose them in the end. It's heartbreaking, man. So, first thing, get them all into the barn, brothers and sisters. That's kind of where I look at this now. Hopefully, trying to teach it to the new generation, and it's happening a little bit. It's moving slowly, but it is happening educating people in the front before they go out into it, and then also reaching in and being available to them, what I could call the mom and pop community. You know, they grow your own mom and pop. They've got their couple growing at the house. They got a little co-op going. They're growing a handful of plants collectively together, whatever it is. That is my community, the one that I'm most attuned to, and my journey with it over the whole time has been that caregiver, you know, mom and pop, grown with intention, and you know, trying to do the right thing by the plant. You know, and I found that if you do the right thing by the plant, mother, you said it, Ryan, you said it to me. You know, it's like if you just listen to her, she'll tell you everything she needs. That is, you went so far with me, with you and me, the first conversation. You know, we're an hour and a half into this bad boy. You know, it's like that's the reality of it. It's like, look, man, that when you said that one line to me, I went, all right, he gets it, because most people don't get it. And I see that in the recreational or the commercial and scalings of it. They think they're going to bend mother to their way. That ain't happening, fool. You
Josh,
see that,
for
right?
for those veterans out there or any listener for that matter who's interested in a growing class, is there anything that you offer that they could subscribe to or anywhere they can specifically find you to get more information?
Yes. It okay, there are courses at the school where I'm at. Um, I've been talked to for a while now, and I'm actively working on it. Is setting up a something similar to what you have here, where people can go and sit down and download and get information. Um, I do consult. You know, it's like if you're really wanting to get into the game, and by that I'm talking the regulated commercial market. My first bit of advice is don't. Okay, but if you want to be prepared for a serious ride, okay, now for the mom and pops, I'm always available to the mom and pop community through my website, my email. You know, you have that email address. You're welcome to give that one out, the Doc Ray at Proton Mail. That's my encrypted email. Why I use it is it's not in the United States and it's encrypted. So it's very confidential, and I help people through that all the time. You know, I'm sort of retired, sort of, you know, I'm in that mode right now of kind of downshifting one more time. But I still will be growing my own with my farm partners here. I have a couple of really good farms here in Virginia that I'm working with. Got a couple of good farms back on the West Coast in California that I'm working with. So we do have stuff available pretty regularly in those markets, you know. So it's all about if I'm there or not. But as far as teaching classes goes, I am actively working on that. I always have a couple of books if someone reaches out that I can give you some good baseline information to get your feet grounded in it. And what I see over and over and over again repeatedly is everybody's trying to push their way as their best way to grow. And it's more about what's the best way for you to grow so you grow the plant to the best of your ability. And that comes in a bunch of different ways where I started working in soil in outdoors in soil to where I am now in closed loop high pressure aeroponics with proprietary LEDs and CO2 injection. It's way, way different. Okay. So everybody does it a little bit differently. It's what works best for you. Most mom and pops, if they're working inside or working in a tent and inherently have problems if they're working in soil, if they're not really good with breaking packaged soils down and re-implementing them and making them uh, compatible for working indoors because indoors is a completely different animal, right? So there's
Right.
all little things, right? So yes, I do help people. I'm kind of at the end of it right now, but I know that I've been asked for several years actually about creating a grow system or a grow manual for people. And I have actually the 4 years of school written for the damn thing for college, 100 to 400 level classes that I worked on for the last couple of years while I was away, so that, but yeah, it,
Doctor, one more question I wanted to talk to you about while I've got you, for our listeners. You talked to me about how you've evolved in your consumption of cannabis over the years to how you use it medicinally now, and you talked to me about those selective terpenes, you just mentioned it. Do you wanna walk folks through a little bit of that and how that healing looks for you? What you found works for you?
are you talking about for my daily, what I do for my daily maintenance kind of thing? Sure, man. I mean, okay, over the years, I've learned that I like a genetic line that has a sativa influence, and I really like Blue Dream. Okay, so I work with that genetic line quite a bit for cerebral balance for my own head. So my morning normally consists of when after I've woken up from my night meds is I roll a blue skunk, man. I roll a blue skunk in the morning with a cup of coffee, and usually have a cup of coffee or two, and smoke about I roll shorties, what you youngsters call dog walkers, I guess is the phraseology like for it, right? So little short ones. It's really I take a king size and fold it in half and cut that puppy in half. And my weed's so good, you only need a little bitty one. So I smoke a little shorty in the morning with my coffee to get me going. Midday, lunchtime, I take CBD pretty regularly now in tincture form, a couple drops under the tongue, and then
What does that
in
help you with, doc?
there's a and this is my own belief and my own theory is I think as you get if you get okay, let's back up a little bit. We all have CB1 and CB2 receptors in our bodies. We have an endocannabinoid system. We're designed to intake and uptake cannabinoids for our well-being, right? Okay, so let's go back to that. I believe that Pretty much everybody, with rare exception, if you're a daily consumer like I am and like you are, that you have that they even have very much in their bodies, you have to get a certain threshold in your bloodstream of where you have active CBD in your body all the time. So I take it every day for general well-being, helps clarity of my mind. Okay, I'm also the whole plant. I'm also taking mushrooms. I'm doing a variety of other things, not psychedelic mushrooms like lion's mane and Reese's and things like that. So I have take a variety of herbs, plant herbs, to help with my head damage and also with my cognitive ability and to keep me moving forward as I've aged. Right. So that morning is, like I said, I get up. As my partners will tell you, I'm pretty quiet in the morning. I don't really talk a lot because I'm still trying to get it all turned back on, from the night before. So give me a few puffs and a little coffee, and then probably around 11 or so, I'm feeling between 11 and noon. I'm actually feeling like eating a little food. I'll take some tincture and eat a little food, and um, smoke periodically throughout the day if I'm feeling like I'm losing focus, or if my body starts bothering me, I'll take a little bit, I'll smoke a little bit more. I'll probably roll two of those little shorty joints, and that's me for the day. But in the evening times, I shift gears and I take a regime of a couple of things that are proprietary stuff that my partners have been working on here in the lab for a few years now, probably 10 or 12 years. Been working on this one sleep therapeutic that is a CBGA and CBD rich formulation that's like 8% CBD and less than 2% THC, and that's a tincture as well. Very quick acting, depending on your threshold, anywhere from 15 minutes to feeling it to an hour to feeling it, of where you are personally. I'd take like a more of a meter dose in a day. It's just I put a few drops in my mouth. This I take about a half a milliliter of it under my tongue in the evening time. And okay, pre taking all this stuff, before all that, and then especially after my wreck, I didn't sleep. Right, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for 6 years. Okay, I didn't sleep for 6 years after my last head damage. I did not sleep, and brothers and sisters, that'll kill you. Sleep is critical. It will kill you if you don't get at least some solid, deep REM sleep and dream a little bit. And I used to not do that 15 years ago. I didn't sleep for a long time from my head damage, and then my military and just life in general. I was, fucking didn't sleep, man. Okay, I've changed everything from sleeping. I don't anymore, but used, starting with the earplugs, to where I've got a white noise machine in the bedroom, and blackout curtains to make it a cave and keep it cool. All these things I do to improve it, my quality of laying down at night, that I didn't do forever and ever in a day. So, but for me, in the morning, a little bit in the morning, smoke throughout the day. Usually, like I said, I take CBD in the afternoon or morning after I've got some food in my stomach. And then at the end of the day, a couple hours before I go to bed, I take my nighttime tincture, literally what I call my nighttime tincture. I take it, and that's whole plant, full spectrum, grown in house, very proprietary formulation that we use. But it's approximately, like I said, it's 8% CBs, CBDs, and then a little under 2% THC. And it's a winner in my book for me. It helps me. I've got people with Parkinson's taking it. I've got people that have, like traumatic brain injuries, like I do, using it in conjunction with some other things. But we're finding some real cool moments, and also some real cool data being gathered in real time right now on some of the things that we're working in. I think I answered that, but about what I do at night, right?
Yeah, no, it's your full regime, and that was well said, and thank you for walking us through that and explaining what you use it for, because so many veterans, what you just mentioned, are taking handfuls of pills every day.
I okay. I was given the big bottle of 750 Vikes, man, and told to go get on the couch and recover with a multi-month prescription to it. That's a fast track into a grave, man. And okay, me where I am in my journey, I was the little brother on my team, man. I'm the last man standing. All my brothers are gone, and it's like okay, right? So it's just the journey, It's like, and believe me, man, like I said, the first time getting the door wrapped around me, I sure as fuck didn't think I'd still be sitting here now. I never thought that moment would ever happen, man. I thought I'd be dead a long time ago, but I'm not. Okay, I didn't die in '09 from a wreck that I thought I shouldn't have gotten up off the table from. And there's all of these things that cannabis is my deal, man. I've taken them. I don't like how they make me feel. I don't like being sick. I don't want to be down all the time. Okay. What I tell people with weed, man, is like it still might hurt, but you don't care, man. That's where cannabis is to me. It numbs it, but it also makes it where it's tolerable. And I see not just in me, a lot of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of vets, especially like on the West Coast where I'm known at. It's like there was a lot of that community, this regime I'm talking about, that they swear by very similar regimes to this of smoke this cerebral type of flower during the morning to get your head focused and cleared. Take a little bit of tincture once you get something into your stomach, take a little bit to get you going through the day, whatever your dosage is. And the reality is one dropper full, 1 milliliter dropper full, a half a milliliter, whatever it is, man, that's nothing. It's plant based, it's whole, full spectrum plant based medicine. And it isn't some synthetic that's going to destroy your liver and destroy your kidneys and take years off your life. And we've both I've lost brothers to fucking heroin and shit in this thing, man. Okay. I've lost brothers to this, to synthetics in this journey in my, from a military career to where I'm now. It's like I see all of this stuff that that could really just is makes me shake my head, man. It's like why is it still okay? What you asked, bringing back around to what you said earlier, what brought me down, man? That was what brought me down. Okay, then I met guys like you, and literally said to me, he said, "Dude, at least they gave you guys drugs back then. They don't even give us good drugs anymore." I heard that, and it's like, wait a minute, it isn't what I would recommend, but fuck, at least that helped get rid of the pain. You're telling me they're giving you aspirin for that? I heard that more than one time. Okay, and then here's me. Why am I sitting here now? This was about 2017, and I was at an event down in LA, and I'm walking with a young guy that honestly, I thought he was close to my age. He was gray headed as fuck all, had a gray beard. He's 35 years old, and he's an old paratrooper, and he can't climb the rocks, to go up and over. All right, the old man's done. I'm going to hobble back to the campsite. My brother turned around and said, "I'll walk with you, old man." And we walked, and he's 173rd Rackasans, man, was in that deal. The year I got hurt, he was in that firefight at the top of the mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, that unassisted firefight that went for fucking like 90 goddamn days. He's one of three brothers to walk out of the valley alive, man. And I had the opportunity, was blessed to be with him at that point in time. And he was having a bad week, and he even said, "I didn't think anybody here because it was raining." And I said, laughed, and I said, "Bro, I was just showed up because it was raining, just figured it'd be me and the guy that was the founder and just a couple of people." But it was he and I walking back, and I broke blue out and handed it to him, and we're smoking. What are you smoking? I always smoke this, pretty much what I smoke day in, day out, walking and smoking. And he started laughing and he started crying all in the same, like 30 seconds. Man, went from just laughing his ass off to tears running down his face. And he looked at me and said, I haven't laughed or cried in over 5 years. And, it was one of those moments with me that I realized that my plant helps me, but it helps a lot of other brothers and sisters, and it helps a lot of civilians that are just dealing with trauma. And, it really made me be what you get now, man. I'm a stubborn old man. And when I walk into the room, 99% of the time, even at this age, I'm still the toughest son of a bitch in the room. It's like I just see it over and over in this arena, unless I'm in a room full of other vets. I see it over and over and over again. And it's like, I'm just not going to allow it to happen. Not until they pry it out of my cold, dead hands, man, for my brothers and sisters in arms and the well-being of the community. I am at a point now of just trying to share the information and pass it forward so that they can have this information in their head. And I've got a lot of young brothers and sisters that have said that to me over the time period. They've literally said, you said some shit to me years ago, and I was in a conversation and I heard you in my head, and it's like, oh, well, that's cool, really, man, because it's like it's just tried and true again. Look, man, I know I'm not the only fucking way to do shit, but I do it from a perspective of my medicine was for my well-being to keep me on this freaking planet, man, and not go out like my teammates had gone out. I really, really try to be a live a more holistic life for the last 45 plus years of yeah, there's a lot of rowdy shit in there, but drink water, man, sit and meditate, eat leafy green vegetables, go for a fucking walk. All of those things is like things that I've just built into my lifestyle now. So anyway, man, we've been killing it, bro. We've been killing it.
Well,
Hour
I have to
85.
say, we're all blessed by having you here today just to tell your amazing story and all of the many things that you've overcome and how you've used this plant intentionally and how you've taken that to the next level to help others out, and I'm so excited for our networks to network. I'm so excited that the there's real support out there, and it's stories like yours that need to be heard to help save more lives because there's so many veterans that are sitting out there on the mountain not talking to anybody, and a lot of them are just doing what they're told to do and taking the fucking pills, and like you said, you're the last out of your team, and that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. Even in my age group, I think half of my team is gone from 22 a day or cancer or something else, you know? So, thank you for sharing your healing, not just your story, but taking it to that next level and researching it to the point, patenting it, and getting that out to so many people that you have already helped save, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to sit here and share with you as after we talked the other day, I got all excited and I called people. I was like, I could talk to Doc all day. I feel like I made a great friend in you, but yet someone I look up to and someone that I want to help. So, before we depart, are there any words that you have for our veteran listeners, our civilian listeners, specifically around if they're curious about trying out cannabis for the first time?
It's a plant, first and foremost. It's a plant, and it's not going to kill you. There's not been one death attributed to cannabis ever, 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 ever. Okay. And there is a way to move yourself through this correctly, that works for you. And not everybody's the same either. That's the other thing, is not everybody is the same. There's a what works for me may not work for you. So just, don't, and I appreciate all your friends that are, hey man, here, smoke this. But there's approach to this that, okay, I didn't have this knowledge 45, 50 years ago that I have now, but as I've seen this evolution in my own journey, this is what I see is not everybody needs to smoke the same thing. So you need to know what you're looking for. If you want something to keep you up and allow you to clear your head and get the demons out of your head and work, that's one genetic line. And it's normally sativa leaning, but it's not everybody. Okay. So in my rambling is find what works for you, keep it. It's something that I started a long time ago, and I still instill this in people today. And I do it with my teams. And went over just a couple of days ago about getting ready for 26 is keeping a journal, keeping a log of what you use. Okay, in the greenhouse, we're dialing in all of our genetics. Exactly, we're dialing in all of our genetics, and every genetic has its own little book. That way, I can walk in and look at it. Ryan can walk in and look at it. You can walk in and look at it, and we can all be on the same place. When it's your journal with your plant medicine journey, the same kind of approach. You tried this and you liked it, and why did you like it? And then maybe even deep dive it a little bit more. If you can get the information on what were the terpenes in that plant, and you'll see this over and over again. These specific terpenes within the cannabis flower that will help you. Okay, there's a bunch of them I could ramble off
Uh,
right now.
Let me show you this. I wrote this book when I retired as a Navy chief. It's called Strains for Pains, Your Cannabis Review Book, Document Your Journey. And the very first thing I put in here was a list of the terps and what their medicinal applications are, the effects, the smell, the strains. And then the next page is some specific strains like Harley Quinn that you had talked about, OG Kush, Blue Dream, and their medicinal benefits. The rest of the book, though, is just open for people to document what they used, how they used it, and how it worked for them. And I used to use a little notebook because some things would put me down and I'm like, "Oh man, I can't do shit." Some things would get me up and going. Some things were worked for me to have a conversation with my mother for 2 hours versus 2 minutes and I'm out. I'm out of here. So I had to keep track of this stuff. So the first thing I did after I retired was I wrote this book, Strains for Pains, to get it out to people. It's on Amazon, but I love what you're saying and know what you're consuming because some things will give me anxiety and I need to avoid that, you know? It's not all good.
There's where I am now, and I see this. I see this missing. It okay, and I've done that before when I was younger. Take big ass bong hits, and then do push-ups, and then jump up and have your buddy wrap his arms around you and squeeze all the fucking air out of you. Okay, right? Okay, been there, done that. But when we're talking about somebody getting into medicine for their well-being, that's not the approach. If you have them smoke something too much or something that's going to have an adverse effect, it's going to be a negative impact on them, and they're probably going to be real apprehensive. And I see that. I've been at events, where the dab tenders just, ripping freaking people, man. I get it, man, but it isn't a new person. That's not the place for this. So that's where I see being, asking some questions. What are you trying to do? What do you want? These are all critical for new consumers. And then once you get your feet wet and you understand it a little bit more, okay, the community, indica to get on the couch and sativa to get up and do something. These are pretty standard things, if you add, um, not necessarily too much of it, but like okay, I'm not big on THC numbers because it's just a load of nonsense. Okay, 26% doesn't mean shit. And what I said using my raspberry example, man, it's like it's not about THC, it's about CBN. Oh man, he knocked his ass out. That ain't THC, kids. That's CBN, and that's what makes you go to sleep. Okay, and that's just the science of it and where it is now. So THC, okay, in my highness and my rambling and forgetfulness is like it's about the terpenes. So now what you need to start doing is what Ryan suggested in his book is that start learning the terpenes. What is linalool? What does it do? What's it come in? What's beta caryophyllene? What does it what are the different smells? So when you're smelling it, smoking it, vaping it, eating it, you taste these things, smell these things. This helps you be a more informed consumer and helps you dial in better what works for you. A huge one, smoking it and eating it are two totally different animals. Okay, totally different animals. Smoking, most people feel the effects within a few minutes to about 20 minutes, full on effect. Edibles, I know people, if they got a slow metabolism, they don't feel it for 2 hours. Okay, so there's all these little things that you need to know as you take your steps into this. And if you don't know who to turn to, there's old timers like me, there's young timers like him. We're all available to get this information out. So that's would be my final thing. If you don't know, ask. The veteran cannabis community in the United States of America is a huge one. There are millions of us, brothers and sisters. You're not by yourself. And I used to think I was just by myself on the top of my hillside, but I realized over the last 15 years that there are a lot of us, even though we're a very small percentage of the country as a whole, there are still millions of us that use this plant day in and day out for our well-being. So
Again, thank you so much, Doc Ray. I'm honored and blessed to have you on today, and thank you so much for sharing your story and what you've been through, the traumas, the pains, the just all of it. It was fantastic, and again, I'm honored. So, hang out. I'll pull you right back, after I end the live here, Doc. So, give me 1 second to close us out. If you're still here, thank you so much. It's stories like Doc Ray's that matter more than ever now. We don't tell these stories for clicks. We tell them because we're veterans, and veterans are dying every single day. 22 isn't just a number. It's brothers, sisters, families, futures lost. Doc Ray's journey proves that healing doesn't look one way. It doesn't come in a standard box. Sometimes it comes through community. Sometimes it's through education. Sometimes it's through a plant that was demonized instead of understood. If this conversation moved you at all today, please share it out. Share it with your senators, your representatives. Share it to other veterans that maybe they need to hear this story. Subscribe to the channel. Get notified when we do more of these interviews because the truth of the matter is there are more and more and more of us, like Doc mentioned today, millions of us out there that are doing this as a safer healing alternative. One that isn't increasing our mortality